Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be discussing Federalist number 12 and 13. Both were written by Alexander Hamilton in 1787, and they cover the topic of governmental revenue. But before we begin with number 12 here, I will note that despite tending to traverse each individual essay linearly, I have found it most useful to jump around a little for this one. So whereas Federalist 11 in the last video endeavored to explain why a union would be supremely beneficial to the vitality of commerce, Federalist 12 really builds off of that in order to demonstrate to the reader that the condition of the government treasury would too be best gratified by the proposed union. You see, Hamilton argues that a country's commercial prosperity is the engine of that nation's wealth, and that government revenue is therefore directly dependent on commercial strength. The ability of a country to pay taxes must always be proportioned, in a great degree, to the quantity of money in circulation and to the celerity with which it circulates. Commerce, contributing to both these objects, must of necessity render the payment of taxes easier and facilitate the requisite supplies to the treasury. In other words, trade increases wealth and its ease of movement, which makes tax collection easier and more fruitful. But why does a government need an income anyway? Well, says Hamilton, a nation cannot long exist without revenues. Destitute of this essential support, it must resign its independence and sink into the degraded condition of a province. Essentially, a government without a requisite revenue ceases to be a meaningful political entity, the nation failing to protect itself or pursue its interests. Next, we move on to everyone's favorite subject, taxes. Right, how does Hamilton exactly plan on filling those government coffers? It's actually interesting because Hamilton says that it would most certainly not be through direct taxation. He calls direct taxes, such as income or property taxes for instance, impracticable because they are difficult to enforce, politically unpopular, and less effective than other measures, at least in a predominantly agrarian society anyway. Such sentiments about the futility of direct taxation cannot help but be humorous to the modern reader, as we enjoy a whole assortment of them today. The Congress even had to pass a constitutional amendment in order to establish a national income tax, which was only ratified by the states as late as 1913. Nowadays, direct taxes account for the majority of federal revenue, but from the 1790s to World War I, tariffs were actually chiefly responsible for supplying governmental income. And this feeds back into Federalist number 12 here, because Hamilton ends up advocating for indirect forms of taxation, specifically duties on imports to fund the government. I will make a quick distinction here, by the way, before we move on. Though tariffs and duties on imports are mechanically identical, they are not synonymous. The difference between them lies in the primary motive for their promotion. That is to say, are you levying taxes on foreign imports to increase revenue, or to protect a particular domestic industry? Usually one is incidental to the other. Moving on, Hamilton makes some final points in the essay as to why a union would better manage and enforce duties on imports. For starters, if the states operated independently in this matter, illicit trade and arbitrage would abound as the rates would be variable among the states, and because of how easy it would be to smuggle things across state lines. But if, on the other hand, we had a shared federal government, Hamilton points out we would altogether only have to secure the Atlantic coast, at the time he was writing this. And so Hamilton concludes that it is therefore evident that one national government would be able, at much less expense, to extend the duties on imports, beyond comparison, further than would be practicable to the states separately or to any partial confederacies. And with that, we are ready to move on to the next essay, where Hamilton develops his thoughts even further. Federalist number 13 is very much an appendage to number 12. It further fleshes out reasons why a united America would almost certainly be more economical than if the states were broken up into 13 separate sovereignties or grouped together under 3 or so confederacies. The crux of Hamilton's argument is that a divided America would need to reproduce infrastructure and bureaucracy essentially equal to that of the singular proposed union for each confederacy in order for them to conduct business of governance. Or, in his words, when the dimensions of a state attain to a certain magnitude, it requires the same energy of government and the same forms of administration which are requisite in one of much greater extent. Conversely, unified governments may share and delegate power across a large country into local regions without the need to replicate full-scale comprehensive governments. Civil power, properly organized and exerted, is capable of diffusing its force to a very great extent, and can, in a manner, reproduce itself in every part of a great empire by a judicious arrangement of subordinate institutions. I suppose the point being that, for Hamilton, in this context, the cost of governance would be cheaper. From here, Hamilton engages in a hypothetical world wherein the states really did break up. He surmises that they would likely formulate themselves into a northern and southern league, largely based upon economic and strategic reasoning. Hamilton seems to think the main difference between the North and South here would be their preferences on international trade. This is an interesting anticipation, as it was before the Industrial Revolution, when the North became known for manufacturing, and also before cotton became exponentially more profitable for the still agricultural South. In any case, the recurring point Hamilton is making here is that a union greater promotes stability, harmony, and security over disunion and separation. So in conclusion, the big takeaway from Federalists 12 and 13 is that the government revenue is contingent on the overall commercial prosperity of the nation. The idea is that there remains an all-pervading incentive to enhance and protect our national trade, because federal income should be dependent on it. Further, a union, rather than separate governments, best promotes and secures greater levels of national wealth, while also more efficiently accruing federal funds at less expense to the citizen. And with that, we have reached the end of another Federalist Paper video. If you enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good one.